Hello, my name is Lucas, and I'm going to show you today a hero's guide to developing with Chrome DevTools. So this here is a QR code. It's a link for the slide presentation. You don't need to scan it right now. I'll show it again at the end of the presentation, so you can wait, or you can scan it right now, and then you can see the slides as I show it. And first, let me tell you about myself. I'm a software developer. I've been developing professionally for 13 years now. I've worked with some languages, Smalltalk, Java, JavaScript, C#, and I've been a DevOps. I've been a game developer. I've been a full stack developer, and right now I'm a full stack developer. And I work at Metronome. So Metronome is Metro's tech unit. And Metro is a business-to-business food wholesale company. And what does that mean? That means that Metro provides services and goods to companies that work on the food sector. So restaurants, hotels, and caterings. And if you ever went to a restaurant here in Germany, there's a high chance that you ate some food that came from Metro. And inside Metronome, we have a whole ecosystem for microservices doing everything from the website where the customers buy stuff to promotion management to services to support the portals for the customers. And inside that, we also have Driver app. So Driver app is the app that the truck drivers and the depot managers use to manage the deliveries for the clients. And this here is the device that the truck drivers uses on their everyday lives. So this is an Android device. And the only difference from this to a mobile phone is that this has a scanner. Driver app is a React app that's wrapped inside a Cordova app. So every rule for web apps apply. And this is how the truck driver starts its day. So they go to the depot. They need to get the deliveries loaded inside the truck. And here you can see inside the depot lots of boxes. So the driver needs to find which boxes he was going to deliver on that day, on that tour. And then as he loads those goods in the truck, he needs to scan it. So for each good that he loads, he scans it, and then we can manage this on the back end. And after the truck is loaded, the driver needs to go to the clients to actually deliver the goods. So at the client, the driver needs to check that the goods were unloaded. He needs to get the signature from the client. And also, if the client says some returns or if they have some deposits, they need to get it and get it to the depot. So then the driver goes from client to client, and at the end of the day, the driver needs to go back to the depot where he leaves the returns, the deposits, do some bureaucratic stuff, and then they close their tour for the day. So at this point, we create a summary with all the deliveries and send it to the client and to the stores. The app is not always online, so sometimes it can get offline, so we need to have support for that also. And if you follow the industry standards, so we have unit tests, functional tests, we do QA, we have a pre-production environment where we can do smoke tests, we can manually play around with the system to see that everything's okay. This prevents you from having that destructive bug. That bug that when you have a deploy, the system just goes down, everything is set on fire. So if you follow industry standards, you can have a little peace of mind that this will mostly not happen. Sometimes it will still happen, but for the most part, we will catch it before it happens. But that's not the kind of bug that I want to tell you about. I want to tell you about the evil bug. The bug that gets inside your production and stays there silently while he messes all your system. And when you encounter this kind of bug, what can you do? So you can use the usual tools. You can go to your logs, check your logs. You can go to the database and query around, see what's going on. Or you can also do what we do, which is get the state on production, replicate this on the test environment, and then poke around the system and see what's going on. And the first thing you do when you do that is you check that things are in order. So you know that the data should look like something, and then you know that the flow should follow a certain path. So the first things that you do is to try to see if there's something weird going on there. And as you do that, you learn what are those patterns that you need to search for looking for those weird things. And the more you do it, the more you learn your system, and the more patterns you learn. And after you've been around your system a lot, all those patterns, they become obvious. And the obvious is powerful. We often forget this. We often forget that something that's now it's obvious at the start, it wasn't so obvious. And this is a mistake, because we need to learn that we need to value the obvious. Because when you have all those patterns, and by themselves, they don't have so much value, but when you gather them together, you get lots of value. So that's what I mean here. You gather a lot of small gains that become one big gain. And I want to show you today how you can leverage dev tools and extensions to help you to be an advantage when you are dealing with those situations on production. So doing an extension for Chrome is really easy. All you need is a manifest.json. And this needs to point to a JSON JavaScript file anywhere. And inside this JavaScript file, you need only vanilla JavaScript. So you don't need fancy frameworks or anything like that. This JavaScript file will be injected inside your app. And then after you have the manifest.json, all you need to do is you go on Chrome extensions, you enable developer mode, and then you choose load unpacked. Oops. And then everything freezes, and you get desperate. So when you're faced a situation like this, what's the solution? Yes. This will ruin the surprise. Ignore everything that you're seeing. Perfect. So, as I was saying, you just need to enable developer mode, load unpacked, and hopefully everything will fail. No. Hopefully everything will work out. And then you have already your own extension. But not as much as a surprise right now. This is not just a slide presentation, this is the demonstration of what I'm going to show you. And this is also the REPL, and this is also the IDE, because we are inside Chrome right now. So we are inside a browser. And this is the DevTools. So I pressed F12, this is the DevTools, and here inside DevTools we have this tab console. Here you have a small REPL that you can write some code and see the result, and it runs inside the context of the page. So you can query anything inside the DOM of your page. And here we also have this tab called Sources. And if you go here on this tab called Sources and select File System, you can actually map a folder inside your file system with the page that you're looking at right now. And then you can use Chrome DevTools as IDE. So for example, this presentation has this HTML here. And if I change the HTML here and save it and reload it, you see that the surprise now has an exclamation mark. And today, what I have here to show are three things. The slide presentation itself. We also have here a small toy system that's meant to simulate the backend. So we have a fake database here, which is just a giant object, and some endpoints that we can call, and they actually change this giant object. And the second thing is the actual extension. So what you're going to see here at this extension, injecting code and injecting some elements on the UI. So now let's talk about superpowers. I want to show you that with extensions and Chrome, you can get 3 superpowers. The first one of them is Superspeed. So when you do this replication of the production environment, or even when you're messing around with your production, I don't do it, but if you do it, you don't want to be stuck on screens that are not related to what you're investigating. So sometimes you have a lot of bureaucracy. You have those screens that you need to click stuff and autocomplete stuff and fill stuff, and you don't want to waste time there, right? And here's an example from my day-to-day work. We have at the beginning of the day that screen where the driver needs to load all the articles on the truck. So this is actually, he does this by scanning, but if you're on debug mode, you can click. And on this example, it's really simple because we have only 3 items, but usually they have a lot more than 3 items. And you see this button here called load all. So this button here is not actually enabled for the driver. This one shows up only because our extension have injected this button here. And what it does is actually what it says. It loads all the goods. So you don't need to waste your time clicking and writing, typing. You gain this super speed. And then comes the second superpower, which is supervision. So we want to see more than the usual client, the usual user can see. We want to see debug information. We want to see IDs. In our case, because our app works offline for most of the time, we also want to see at what time the app was able to sync with the backend. And here's an example. After the truck driver have already loaded the articles on the truck, then he can see then they can see the clients that they need to deliver the goods. So for example, we have here Alice's Restaurant and Bob's Burger, and there's this button, Enable Superpowers. So this wasn't here before. This is actually also injected by the extension. And if we click here, we have some debug information about those tours. So the last time the tour was synced, the app version, which is really important because we can have some conflicts if the shape of the state of the tour changed. So we need to know what was the app version that the truck driver was using when they delivered the goods. And also the tour ID that we can use then to do queries and do some changes. But you don't want this only as elements on your UI. You also want to be able to code, to write some command lines, because JavaScript has this nice API for map reducing. So sometimes you want to go to your database and do some queries, but sometimes it's just faster for you to get a JSON and to just map reduce it. So in this example here, our extension have injected some code where we can get the tours for a given date. Then we get all the deliveries for this date. We filter the articles that are a box of potatoes. We get the quantities of those articles, and then we sum it. And then we know that at that day, we got 9 boxes of potatoes delivered. And for example, I can remove this part here where we get the quantity. And what we are going to get is all the deliveries that have box of potatoes in it. And another cool thing that you have with Chrome DevTools is the function copy. So if you call this then copy, this JSON will actually be copied to your clipboard. So if I press Ctrl V here, you can see that I have the result of this query on my clipboard. Another cool thing is the DevTools, it's not only about text, but you can have also visual elements on it. For example, if I call here the deliveries, with ID 1. If I use console table, I have a table with all the deliveries with ID 1. And this table is really cool because you can order stuff by clicking here on the column headers. And you're also not limited to only tables. You can have also graphics. So what you do is you can use console log to have some CSS elements, and you can use images on base 64 as the background, and then you can have some images there. And those images, they don't need to be static, they can be dynamic. For example, here we have a function that's called already loaded on date, where we give it a date, and it shows bar chart with all the deliveries made on this date. So, for example, if I click here, not made, but loaded. If I click here and I load 2 more items, you can see that the bar chart is growing. And if you click on all of them, you can see that's almost 100%. It's not 100% because at this date there is another tour. And the last superpower that I wanted to show you is super strength. So it's not enough for you to just see stuff. You need to be able to change stuff. Preferably on your dev environment, but sometimes even on your production environment. For example, we once had a bug where all the deliveries were made, the tour was all okay, but at the end of the day, the last sync was not running. For us, this is a problem because even though we had good values on our database, we needed the tour to be finished because we need to create a summary that we send to the stores and And then what we did here is to add this button that, if we click here, it just force finish all the tours. We didn't actually did this as visual elements. We did it as a code because then we can version control it. And more importantly, we can go here to the network tab and save the log of the calls. And here on this slide, I want to show you that you then can combine the superpowers. So for example, we have here a function that was inserted by our extension that set tours to finished, but it needs the ID of the tour. And for example, if we want to finish the Alice's Restaurant tour, we don't have the ID. So we enable superpowers, and then we can see that the tour ID is 1. And now that we know the tour ID, we can just go to the console, execute it, and if I reload it, you see that the tour was finished. Obviously, you will still have to use your database, you still have to query your database, look at your logs, and do whatever you do, but this can be just another tool on your tool belt. This can be an advantage to you to investigate and fight and squash those evil bugs. And the most important thing is that you can then share your power. So you remember all those patterns that were obvious to you? Well, they are not that obvious to your teammates. So if you have them in this format, this physical format, which is code, you can put them on a version control, and then you can share your power. And even better, your teammates can share their power with you also. So all the code for the slides, the toy system, and the extension is in this link. There's the QR code and also the link down there. You can go there, check it out, play around, maybe use it to your own system. And I hope that this gives you a little superpower that you can use to squash the evil bug. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Doesn't look like, then there's a question.
Hi, my question is, do you have only one front-end application, or do you build an extension for every application you have?
We, on Driver app, we have 2 front ends, and no, we have only one extension. So the thing about injecting those elements is here on these slides are easy because this is actually kind of static. But when you have an application with dynamic elements, then you need to use a mutation observer to check when you can actually inject those elements. And with that, you can have as many front ends as you need. But there's a point. We have two front ends, but they are on the same domain. So when you create a manifest.json file, you need to say which domain this extension has authorization to work on. But then you could do one extension that has this authorization to work on both domains.
Any other question? Then, thank you, Lucas.
No, there's...
Oh, there.
there's
Where? I have a question. One moment. Because otherwise...
So my question is this extensions, this process that you're showing here, is this specific to Chrome developer tools, or could it be adapted to work in other browsers as well?
Good question. I'm almost 100% sure that it isn't. But my experience is with Chrome. And when I open Firefox and go to the equivalent to DevTools, I just kind of get lost. But I know that a lot of those functionalities, they are present on Firefox. So use the tool you're more familiar with. I would even recommend Firefox. I still want to do the transition, but right now I'm more familiar with DevTools. And I know that on Chrome, I'm pretty sure that you can do it. On Firefox, and I'm almost sure that you can do it.
Any more? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be at the Metronome booth for the next hour. If you have more questions or ideas that you want to share, please come meet me. Thank you.